friends, that's the sound of an old 1940s Harmony-made Gene Autry cowboy guitar that I'm getting ready to ship off to Scott Baxendale to be rebuilt. As you can hear, this guitar has a nice tone, but it's in pretty rough shape. It won't stay in tune. It's got big cracks in the body, and it really needs a lot of work. I first discovered Scott Baxendale several years ago when I was looking for someone to rebuild my dad's old Harmony Sovereign guitar. Scott has a process that he calls a Baxendale conversion, where he takes old budget guitars from the 30s, 40s, and 50s and rebuilds them. Those guitars made by companies like Harmony and Kay and Silvertone were cheap budget guitars in their day, but they were made of solid wood that's been aging for all these years. And Scott takes the back off, replaces the ladder bracing with X bracing, resets the neck, builds a new bridge, puts on a new set of tuners, and refrets the guitar. When he's finished, you've got a guitar that plays like a brand new world-class instrument, but with the look, feel, and most importantly, the tone of an old vintage guitar. And besides that, you don't have to cut down any trees to make these guitars. I'm about to ship this guitar off to Scott, and I'll let you know how it sounds in a future episode. I'd like to thank Baxendale Guitars for sponsoring today's episode. And if you've got an old guitar sitting in the corner or hanging on the wall that you'd like to bring back to life, look up Scott Baxendale. Check him out at baxendaleguitar.com. To kick off the show, I'd like to recite a poem off my latest album, Cowboy Recitations, which is available in the iTunes Store or as a CD from my website. This is a hobo poem written by Dr. Guy Standard, and this came to mind when today's guest was talking about hobo music and culture. This is entitled The Hatchet Man. The hatchet man is out, so hobos, hold your stew pots high. You, Jake the Fake, you, Whiskers, yeah, you, Roundhouse. It is I who speak tonight. I know you like the weather. I know it's springtime, too. I know you got an itch to catch a train. I see the sky each morning and the grass is smelling new. I know you got an itch to catch a train. But the hatchet man is out, so hobos sleep with stew pots on. It'll sound just like a tin roof in a rain. You, raggle-taggle, yeah, you, rout, I greet you as I warn, there where I didn't see you lie. No need to stop and mourn. There is a song, it will not die as sure as I was born. But the hatchet man is out. So hobos, hold your stew pots overhead. That's right, you got it. Hold your stew pots high. And better dream inside 'em. Howdy folks, this is Andy Hedges, and you're listening to Cowboy Crossroads. On each episode, I interview a different guest and ask them to share stories and discuss music, poetry, and culture from the working cowboy West and beyond. My guest today is Sourdough Slim, the last of the Vaudeville Cowboys. Slim is an accordion-playing, yodeling, singing cowboy who perfectly captures the sights and sounds of the 1920s and 30s. I sat down with Slim to record this interview in a hotel room in Santa Clarita, California, where we were both performing at the Santa Clarita Cowboy Festival, and we had a great visit. Ian Tyson has called Slim the best yodeler in the world, and Ramblin' Jack Elliott has said to Slim, "I'm blessed just to be riding in your car." Here's Sourdough Slim.
We had a family cow ranch that I wasn't on all the time, but huge inspiration. And then we also lived down in Southern California here in Simi Valley, where they had all the movie ranches, the Iverson Ranch and the Spawn Movie Ranch and the Corrigan's thing. And my mom would take us down there, and we'd just kids, and we'd see those gunfights on the streets, and they were so real to us, and they had those caps of blood, and oh man, it was just so real to us, And I was just so into that whole scene, but the music end of it, as a kid, and it kind of was maybe in the background and stuff, but it was there. And my grandfather, real cowboy. I mean, this guy, you looked up to him. He's on his big Palomino horse, and you look up at him and idolize this guy. But he was really into the cultural thing, and he read all these paperback, these dime novels, and he used to. He had a 78 player, and he would play not the singing cowboy stuff, but this was the stuff that predated that, the traditional cowboy stuff, and I'd hear Red River Valley and so forth and so on, and it was just in my head, and the images. I used to go out to the barn, and my grandfather had boxes of these dime novels that he'd read, these Western dime novels. And I don't know if you've ever seen the covers of those from the 20s and 30s. And the illustration work was just fabulous. The images, Oh man, and I'd sit out there and just dream, I wouldn't read the books. I'd just look at that artwork on those things. And that's where Sourdough Slim kind of came from, was from those images. And I didn't realize that until kind of later. I realized, well, where did I come up with this idea for this? Because I wasn't alive during that time or anything, but thinking back on it, that had a lot to do with it. Looking at those great illustrations of, dramatic, and the cowboys. And back then, in the 30s, the hat styles changed. Things changed in the 30s. But in the 20s and before 20s, they had the big hats like I wear, That was like, from the Buffalo Bill's Wild West days, and the 101 Ranch and all that stuff. And when I think of vaudeville, I think of cowboy vaudeville. That's kind of the thing, There were some cowboy stars in vaudeville, of course. Will Rogers, and he was on the big circuit. He was in the Follies and the Ziegfeld Follies, but that was big time. There was two different vaudeville circuits. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, we had the Keith circuit, which was they call that the big time. Then they had the small time, which was the low, which was generally the big time was up in the northern part of the states, more popular states. Lowe's, the small time, was in the south, and that's where Jimmy Rogers. Jimmy Rogers was a star, in Lowe's. And he traveled in the South, but they tended to. You had the big theaters for Keith, the Albee vaudeville shows. That was big. Ziegfeld Follies too, and everything. But I was attracted more to the tent show type things. More carnival things, that kind of thing. The pathos of that. It just always just got to me. Rather than the big stars and these guys traveling around in tents, sometimes theaters, but a lot of times tent shows, you come to the edge of town, just like a circus, and the people waiting every year to, they're coming to town, and they'd come through, and that's what Jimmy Rogers, he talk about Vaudeville Cowboys, he was the Vaudeville Cowboy for sure, and he played the vaudeville circuit, Lowe's Vaudeville Circuit. But anyway, getting back to that, where it all came from, I had so many influences as a kid, and I loved it all. Whether it was the real deal on the ranch, or whether it was, the going to Disneyland and Frontierland. I used to just, we go to Disneyland, and I'd say, I'll stay here in Frontierland. You guys go do whatever you want. Come back and pick me up. I'll be here. I wandered around, and I just, I was just, and I always have been. And it's just kind of something that has never gone away. I've always enjoyed that. So, but I was always fascinated more by the pre singing cowboy era, and the images and stuff, the silent movies, Tom Mix and all those guys, and that gigantic hats they wore, and they weren't all, it wasn't flashy, you didn't have the sequin, all that junk. No, it was they were dressed more like they were real cowboys, all these guys come from are you familiar with the 101 Ranch?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you would, because you live in that neck of the woods, sort of. But the 101 Ranch was huge, and it was surprising how many of the B-Western guys got their start. I mean, Buck Jones and Ken Maynard and who's the guy that Don Edwards liked so much?
Tom Mix.
Tom Mix, yeah. All those guys, they worked on the 101 Ranch, and they did the shows,
Tell me more about the 101 Ranch, though, for my listeners who may not be familiar with it.
Well, the 101 Ranch was in northern Oklahoma, and it was huge. It was a huge piece of property, and it was very similar. It was in competition, really, in some ways, with the shows that Buffalo Bill put on and Pawnee Bill put on. But the 101 Ranch was this huge ranch, and everybody went there. It was like it was just unbelievable. The hospitality and it was built up, from what I've read and from what I've researched, it was the place to be. If you were interested in cowboy culture and stuff, you went there. The presidents went there, and the royalty went there, and it was the place to be. And anyway, the 101 Ranch, of course, also they toured, just like Buffalo Bill's Wild West and Pawnee Bill's, and they had their show, and that's what I would say. Vaudeville Cowboys; those are Vaudeville Cowboys, even though, because it was that era, it was that era, that early, the 20th century up till 1930. When 1930 came along, it all became Hollywood, and kind of, it all just kind of got that sequin suit thing to it that doesn't appeal to me as much as the real deal. These guys that were, and having said that, that was, a lot of those, you see a show like, if you went and saw a show what Gene Autry would be, let's say, doing his theater run, where he would come out and they did, they all did this. Tex Ritter, all of them did that, where they would go to the theater before their movie came on, debut of their movie, and they would do their show, and they have a little troupe of people, and they could have some Indians, and they would have ropers, and they have all different entertainment, kind of a mini Wild West show, so to speak, But things changed in the 30s, and of course, vaudeville died as soon as soundies came out. That was it. That was the end of vaudeville, and people just, they still tried to keep it going. They'd have little bits of it before movies and stuff, but the heart and soul of the thing was over. That whole thing, and so that's what really captures me. And I can't tell you why exactly. I don't even know why. I am so, obsessed, so to speak. I mean, that's kind of maybe going a little too far, but I'm very fascinated, very taken by that period from the 1890s up to about 1930. And it just, in a very fascinating time, and great characters came out of that period. And when Hollywood, took over the singing cowboy and brought all that out, it kind of... It just doesn't mean as much to me for some reason. I'm just taken by that early period. So, one time Tom Russell told me this great story about when he was young and he went to Coney Island and here was this sideshow with this singing cowboy up there from a different era, and there he was up there, and it wasn't the Gene Autry singing cowboy. It was just this guy dressed, in ranch clothes, more or less, and just up there singing. And it's that kind of thing. It's that kind of thing fascinates me. The other thing about it is that, back in the 20s and 30s, cowboy singers, people always say, well, Sons of the Pioneer, you think they sang all cowboy songs. They didn't sing all cowboy songs. They sang popular songs of the day. They sang novelty songs. I do Barnacle Bill the Sailor. Barnacle Bill the Sailor was in the repertoire of a lot of cowboy singers, because, they wanted to have the show that had a lot of variety in it. And so that's what I try to kind of pattern my show after, throw a lot of variety in there. And, I'm a comical character, it's just that's just who I am. I've always been kind of the clown, the kind of the jokester at the party, cut up. And so, I've just kind of embraced that and I use it in the act, but, and call the act, last of the Vaudeville Cowboys, but it's because it incorporates more than just the singing, and actually about Riders in the Sky, they did, if you ever saw their show, when they first were going, they were great. They had a lot of comedy in there and stuff. And I just, the vaudeville reference has a lot to do with that, has a lot to do with all these different aspects. You went and saw a vaudeville show and you saw, acrobats and you saw dancers and you saw pretty women and you saw magicians and you saw jugglers and you saw a piano player, a virtuoso piano. You saw one right after the other, and they had 8 minutes to do that, and they had it was amazing. It really it just I love it. They had these acts where they would do the same act for 20 years. 8 minutes, the same 8 minutes. They'd come out, and they had it down, of course, after 20 years, but they do the same thing, the contortionist, it's the same thing every time. But, people would come, they'd travel from one town to the next, and people would come and they want to see that, they'd want to see that guy do that again. I saw him, he's great, he's got to do it. And they would, they wouldn't disappoint. They would do the same act every time, and they had it down. But as far as why I'm so taken by it, I don't know. I just am, and it's kind of patterned my act. A lot of people will say they obviously realize that I have listened and watched a lot of the classic comedians. W.C. Fields is somebody who, of course, is been a big inspiration to me, who was in vaudeville, of course, for during the teens and the 20s, and he was in the Ziegfeld Follies with Will Rogers and Eddie Cantor and Burt Williams and a lot of the great vaudeville entertainers. But anyway, the variety is what I like, and it's a kind of show. I'd love to see my show. I'd love to be out in the audience because I like the variety. I like bam, 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 bam. That's what vaudeville was all about, was speed. You had to come out there and wham, 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 8 minutes, you killed them. If you didn't kill them, you ain't going to make it. You had to have, so that's why each of them had an act that usually they had it down. They knew it was going to kill. They went out there, did their 8 minutes, and bam, sacco, they got them. And that's what I love. I like the variety. I like comedy, and I like it. It's just, I wish I could see my show.
I love the music that was recorded on 78 RPM records in the 1920s and 30s, especially the cowboy singers like Haywire Mac McClintock, Carl T. Sprague, and Jules Verne Allen. I hear a lot of that in Slim's music, and I asked Slim to talk about the music and the artists that have influenced him.
back when I was in my late teens and 20s, I started discovering, as you probably have, as I know you have, I started discovering all these 78s, and there was a lot of reissues too on LP, but that you could seek out, and there was a lot of great sources. There used to be Old Time Music magazine, and there was a lot of publications that aren't out now that you could get, and they would tell you that here, this stuff's coming out. And so when I first started hearing, like I say, I'd heard a lot of this stuff on 78s growing up, but rediscovering it was just magic. I couldn't get enough of it. And like Harry McClintock, the whole hobo scene. You got Goble Reeves, the Texas Drifter, Harry McClintock, Hobo Jack. There was a whole bunch of them, and they had this was late 20s, whole scene of, because a lot of people, the hobos were a part of our, big part of our culture, riding the rails. You could do all that, and it was this thing, and the hobos had their own distinctive music, and I just thought it just fabulous. Haywire Mac, of course, Mac McClintock was one of the leaders in that thing, but Goble Reeves, you must be aware of Goble Reeves.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and he would do, that was his thing, and he claimed that he invented that style of yodeling, but I don't know if he did. There's others that did it, but it really caught on in Australia. There was a lot of Australian singers back in the 30s that would listen to Goble Reeves, and they do that. For some reason, they loved that, style of yodeling. But I just loved that whole hobo thing. So I started, getting reissues, and I started collecting 78s. I was collecting 78s like crazy, because stuff that you find something that isn't on a wow, all right, here's, look at this Mac song. Wow, this I've never seen this, So the whole hobo thing I really got into, and then the traditional cowboy thing with Carl Sprague and Marin Dahlhart and the whole thing. And that period of popularity for those guys was only the late 20s. By the early 30s, when Gene Autry and the whole singing cowboy, the Hollywood thing started coming out, that died away, all that traditional stuff. But the original guys, came out with that stuff in 25, 26 and on, and Jimmy Rogers, of course, is a part of that. But, I just loved that stuff, and I couldn't get enough of it. And also the other thing, but all the music from the 30s, the sweet bands and the different jazz bands, the blues, all the blues guys, just love all that stuff. So, if I have my way, when I perform, I like to do a variety of stuff from the 20s and 30s, from that period, taken from blues singers, jazz stuff. And a lot of those traditional singers were listening to that stuff too, of course. You ever hear a guy named Mark Williams?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Williams. Great. Yeah, and he did a lot of popular songs as well as traditional cowboy songs and stuff. But that whole thing, I couldn't get enough of it. And so I had always been in I played mandolin, and I've been in bands my whole life since I got out of high school. I started playing steel guitar when I was 6. My mom gave me steel guitar lessons when I was 6, and I was always in the school band playing some, I guess the French horn was the instrument that the music instructor, he said, "Oh, you got the perfect lip for the French horn." But anyway, I was always in bands, but I'd never done a solo act before. And in the late 80s, I think about 88, I had come up with this idea for Sourdough Slim, this accordion-playing yodeling cowboy, which was just the image of the whole thing I just loved. And of course, it all goes back to, here's this comical character in the B westerns. Who the comical character was the sidekick? What instrument did he play? He played the accordion. And a lot of times people will go, "Oh, what, you're playing accordion? I mean, what does that have to do with cowboy music?" They forget, or they never knew that back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, every cowboy band had an accordion player. Accordion was, it was an instrument, and of course, all the sidekick characters, that was the instrument they were given. And, Smiley Burnett was a great accordion player. So it's just that image, that whole thing is kind of I was just swept away by it all. And so when I started my solo act, which I didn't think, I was amusing myself pretty much. I thought, well, I'll play a few, play on the streets, and maybe I'll play a couple of retirement homes, and I'll do a school bazaar or something. I didn't know. It was just something I was just so into. I loved the whole thing, and I had collected vintage clothes for years and years. And so I had the attire, I had the whole thing, and started this act, and I just didn't realize there was any market for it. It wasn't something I thought, well, I'm gonna, but I loved the whole image of it, the whole idea of it, and incorporating all of these ideas and all this stuff that had just, that I love from the 20s and 30s and before, but it's funny. And then I went to Elko in '90, and look at this. I had no idea this whole Renaissance was going on. I had no idea. But somebody told me, say, you got to go to Elko. You got to go to Elko. I went, my God. And people just embraced me. I thought, when I first went to Elko, it was cowboy, a lot of, buckaroos. I mean, it was the real deal. It's since, as everything does, it evolves and changes. But I was a little intimidated, because here I am, dressed in this comical cowboy outfit, playing the accordion, but they totally embraced it. And Buck Ramsey was the guy that, he couldn't get enough of it. And he was the guy that got me into, the first Elko. The next year they invited me. I guess 90 was when I went and did the open mics and all that junk. And was playing it. And people just, I couldn't believe it. I was like, really? These people understand where the heck I'm coming from. And Buck loved it, and he said, you got to have this guy next year. And so they invited me, in '91, be on the main stage, and it was beautiful because I thought people would be going, and I'm sure there were people that did, but for the most part, people really embraced it because, there's this. Not to be blowing my own horn, but there's a lot of entertainment value in it. People laugh. They're having a good time. I'm very fortunate to have that gift to make people laugh. That's everything. That's great. So anyway, it's cool. It's a neat deal, and I love what I do. I love getting up on stage today as much as I did 40 years ago, or more, It's just something I just love doing. I can't see myself not doing it. But anyway, I don't know what else about the musical influences. I listen to it all. Anything that was recorded in the 20s and 30s, I listen to it. I don't care if it was, a solo performer strumming a guitar, or if it was a hillbilly band, or if it was, an ethnic group, whether it was, I love the French musette stuff from the 30s especially. Oh, just great stuff. But I listen to it all. That period in music, the 20s and 30s, wow, what an incredible time, and why do I like? I don't know, but I just do.
Is there a story behind the name Sourdough Slim?
Well, yeah, I've come up with. I like to, the real story is not that amusing. So I've come up with stories over the years, but the real story is the fact that Slim has been a nickname that I've had since I was in my early 20s. It kind of came about. I was in a band, a Western swing band, and there were 2 Ricks in the band, and so everybody started calling me Slim, and it just caught on. Pretty soon, everybody calls me Slim. Okay, but I liked it. I mean, I'm a Western entertainer. That's fine with me. But I started this solo act. And I thought, well, I do something. I want to do something that'll stand out, and something that's kind of. And once again, I wasn't thinking that there was going to be any big deal or anything. I was just kind of amusing myself. But I thought, what's something. I've spent most of my life in the gold country of California. Okay, so you want a moniker that's going to kind of represent. Most musicians do. I thought, well, Sacramento Valley Slim, that's no good. Sierra Slim, that's no good. But sourdough, being from the gold country, is synonymous with the gold country. It's a name that like, hey, you sourdough, you, and it's also part of that whole California, the sourdough bread thing. But it's really more kind of a mining type. It's a term. It's an endearment that was used, and of course is used in Alaska, but was also used in the gold rush in that time. You say, that's sourdough, and so I thought, that's pretty good. I live in the gold country. Sourdough Slim. Hey, that's got a ring to it. What the hell, And over the years, I've said, maybe it wasn't such a good idea, but I'm stuck with it, and and it works, and people remember it. And that was my whole point, when I first started the solo act. I thought, well, if I can get a name for myself, and get established. I was 40 years old when I started the thing, and I thought, I can get a name and get established, I'll always have work, Even there'll always be somebody say, oh man, that Sourdough Slim guy, he's in town. We got to go see him. I remember seeing him 30 years ago. I got to go see him. So, and it's kind of worked that way, It kind of worked that way for me. I've kind of built up this thing traveling around the country, and I'm unique, I'm different, and so people remember it, and they come, and man, I've been really fortunate,
I always enjoy talking with fellow musicians about road stories and bad gigs, but it's not every day that you get to ask an accordion-playing, yodeling, singing cowboy about their bad gigs.
Oh man, there's been a lot of tough go, accordion-playing, yodeling cowboy, playing the county fair, kids, behind the stage shooting peas at me through straws. I've had that happen. I was performing at a little Jefferson County fair up in Madras, Oregon, and they had me strolling, and I was strolling at night around. I was around over by the barns, and a couple of Indians came out and pulled a knife on me. And they could have just been joking. I'm sure they kind of were. They just thought they'd have some fun with me, this yodeling cowboy. Here I was. And I just reached over and by the handle and grabbed the knife out of his hand. And I said, man, that is a nice knife. That is a good knife. And they were just dumbfounded. I handed it back to them, and they just kind of, and they walked off. And it was kind of a funny thing, It was a funny deal. I was playing an accordion festival in Northern California one time, and who's the guy that was Ralph Nader running for president? So they tell me, they said, "What we're gonna probably have to cut your set short because Ralph Nader's here and he wants to give a speech." Okay, fine. I did about 10 minutes, and they went, that's it. So I'm fine, and I started to walk off, and Ralph Nader's, press guy comes up, and And he says, okay, Ralph's going to come on. We got to do something spectacular. What do you want to do? I said, hey, this is an accordion festival. I said, I tell you what, I will play the beer barrel polka and Ralph comes running out. That's the way to do it, And so he says, great idea. He goes up, I see him whisper to Ralph Nader. And so Ralph's standing there kind of scowling. He's not sure. I don't know. So, bam, you're on. Da, 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 da. And Ralph just stands there, and he doesn't come out. And I play it for, about 2 or 3 minutes, and he's just standing there. He wouldn't come out. He blew it. He really blew it, because if he did come out there, the crowd would have loved him. But he didn't do it, and then he waited like a done. He came out there, and it was a dud, and he had this canned speech. And it didn't work, but it was really kind of, looking back, it was really a funny thing. I was playing a corporate event down here in Southern California last summer, and huge corporation. It was their annual, party. They had their families, everybody there. And it was the corporation, I guess, employed 17,000 people. And there was 7,000 people at this event, okay? And they had a big open field, like a big football field or something, and then had a big main stage at the end of it, okay? And it was a Western theme, they had these corporate events, they had different themes. This was a Western theme, so they hired me. And 7,000 people out there, it's just like this ocean of people. And they're all, they got booths and they're getting their free meals and drinks and stuff. And, okay, you're on, Sourdough Slim. And I come running out, and a big, huge wall of speakers. I mean, this thing, 7,000 people. And nobody out of 7,000 people, maybe 3 or 4 people just kind of looked up at me. And they're all just talking, And, it's humiliating. It's like, and you're up there just, and you got to do your act. I always give it 110%. I'm up there doing it. I did my thing, and for the life of me, I couldn't even, it just, you walk off, you feel like, oh my God, I couldn't even get one person to react to it. But, those are the kind of gigs you do, and you get your money, you get paid, and you go, okay, that's it. I did my job, and this is what I do for a living, and you have to expect that. But one of the, like I was saying before, one of the things that I find really fascinating and I just love is the variety that a lot of these early cowboy singers and different performers had. And a cowboy singer in the late 20s, early 30s, it was very common for them to have pop songs in their repertoire, common for them to have, maybe a jazz number or a novelty tune. And they always had novelty tunes. Novelty tunes were, always something that most cowboy entertainers or, entertainers of any kind have some kind of novelty thing in there. And a guy that I was really inspired by, who wrote a lot of novelty tunes and wrote for Vernon Dalhart, Carson J. Robinson, you're probably familiar with him. And I just loved his stuff. And I think he wrote a lot of the hits that Vernon Dalhart had. I know he did. But he also was good friends with Frank Luther. After he left Dalhart, he palled up with Frank Luther, and they came up with Barnacle Bill the Sailor, which became a standard in everybody's repertoire. It was a standard. That you hear a cowboy singer, he probably would have. Glenn Orland is a perfect example. Glenn, was from the old school, and he had Barnacle Bill in his repertoire. So I have it. This is actually the return of Barnacle Bill. This is. And of course, as you know, when World War II came out, the sailors had a blast with some very risque versions of Barnacle Bill the Sailor. So when I play Barnacle Bill the Sailor, a lot of times to an older crowd, which is basically the crowd I usually play to, they always cringe, like, oh no, he's not going to sing those dirty versions, are they? You know, and when I get done with the song, I always see him go, oh, he didn't do it. So I'll do the Barnacle. This is my version of it. It's not the whole thing because it's a long song. But this is the return of Barnacle Bill, which could have been in the repertoire of any cowboy singer.
Ahoy, ahoy, ahoy! Well, here I am on land again, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. I just drank 16 quarts of gin, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. I had me a gal one here before, I says I'd never come back no more. But here I am right at her door, said Barnacle Bill the sailor.
Who's that knocking at my door? Oh, who's that knocking at my door? I'll come down and let you in, cried the fair young maiden.
Why, it's only me from over the sea, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. I just got back from Portuguese aboard a British whaler. I whipped 10 guys in the port saloon, I knocked some coal with a brass spittoon. I wrecked the place like a bloomin' typhoon, said Barnacle Bill the sailor.
Oh, your whiskers are scratching my chin. Oh, Bill, your whiskers are making my face all red. Why didn't you get a shave? Cried the fair young maiden.
Why, I ain't shaved in 20 years, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. Save me from washing my neck and ears, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. My whiskers grew so bloomin' fast, they covered the ship from hull to mast. Why, the seahorses eat 'em instead of grass, says Barnacle Bill the sailor.
Oh, did you see any whales? Oh, did you see any whales? Oh, did you see any whales? Cried the fair young maiden.
Oh, I caught me more than 1,000 whales, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. I grabs 'em by the big toenails, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. I tied 'em together 2 by 2. I drove 'em down to Timbuktu, but I trades 'em in for a kangaroo, said Barnacle Bill the sailor.
Oh, did you bring me a kangaroo? Oh, I wish I had a kangaroo. Why didn't you bring me a kangaroo? Cried the fair young maiden.
Ah, you whining women are driving me daft, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. I'll sign aboard a pirate craft, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. I'll plunder and sink every ship that comes. I'll hang the crew with their bloomin' thumbs. They can walk the plank, the dirty bums, said Barnacle Bill the sailor. I'm off again. Goodbye.
That's just terrific, Slim. Just terrific. Thank you so much for taking the time to interview.
You know, I know what I like. I you know, and I'm just, you know, totally immersed in all of this stuff, as you are. You know, it's so cool to find somebody that, you know, another kindred spirit, somebody that's just that understands and just is just taken by this stuff and understands how magical it is and what an important part of our culture it was. Because you know, this is the thing, is it was at a time when the majority of people lived in a rural atmosphere. You know, and you know that. I mean, this is why this music came out and why it was so popular. You know, the cowboy music and the old time and the hillbilly and the blues was, you know, same thing. A lot of rural influences. And as our culture, I mean, as the demographics and everything has changed, and as people have moved and it's become an urban, you know, now it's, what do they say? It's like maybe 8% people live in a rural environment. You know, 92% of the people live in an urban environment. So it just kind of changed people's tastes, and the whole thing changed. But at that time, that was really dominant, and people had radios. They didn't have a TV or anything. They just had radios, and that was their connection with the world. And you had every station across the country had a cowboy band. They all had a cowboy band. Sometimes it would be, they'd be a jazz band for one program, and the next program they'd dress up in cowboy clothes and they'd be a cowboy band, and then they would be a popular singing thing. So but back in the heyday when the late 20s, 30s, when this whole thing was just huge, man, the cowboy. Wow, I would love to. I just love to go back to that time. Wouldn't it be great to be able to go back to the 20s and 30s and just be there, man? God, that'd just be fabulous.
All right, folks, that's it for this episode. I'd like to thank Sourdough Slim for taking the time to visit with me. You can find out more about Slim at sourdoughslim.com. I'd like to thank Baxendale Guitars for sponsoring this episode. You can find out more about Baxendale at baxendaleguitar.com. You can find out more about me and this show at andyhedges.com. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help spread the word, it would help me out if you would leave a 5-star rating and a review on the iTunes store. And be sure and subscribe while you're there. It's free and it helps more people find the show. If you'd like to contact me with a story or a comment or a question, I would love to hear from you. Send an email to andy@andyhedges.com. Thank you for listening to Cowboy Crossroads.